When the world turns against you, it is not the end of your story, it is the beginning of your awakening. Most people fear rejection as if it is a sign of failure, but rejection is often a sign that you are stepping out of the version of yourself others depended on. The moment you stop living as a reflection of their expectations, the world feels threatened. They don't turn against you because you are wrong. They turn against you because you are changing, and your change exposes everything they refuse to face within themselves. Let me ask you something powerful. Why do people only support you when you remain small, predictable, and controllable? Because your growth holds a mirror to their stagnation. Your courage unmasks their fear. Your authenticity dismantles the role they assign to you. When you evolve, you disrupt the unspoken agreements that once held the relationship together. They wanted the old you, the agreeable you, the version of you that made their world easier, not the version of you that makes your own world clearer. When the world turns against you after you reject a persona, it is not a coincidence, it is a psychological reaction woven deeply into human nature. The persona is the mask you learn to wear so others will accept you. It is the version of yourself shaped by expectations, culture, family, society, and the silent pressure to fit in. You adopt it so you can be loved, approved of, and understood. But the persona is not you. It is only a surface arrangement, a strategic disguise that helps you operate smoothly within the social world. And because it is a disguise, it can never contain the fullness of your authentic being. The moment you outgrow that mask, tension begins. People around you start to sense a shift. You are no longer giving them the predictable responses they are used to. You are no longer fulfilling the identity they projected onto you. You stop laughing at the jokes you don't find funny. You stop agreeing to responsibilities you never wanted. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. This change disrupts the equilibrium they relied on. They didn't love your essence. They loved the persona because it made their world easier and more familiar. When you remove the mask, you challenge the unspoken contract you once signed with others. You challenge the version of you that served their comfort. Instead of conformity, you choose authenticity. Instead of compliance, you choose truth. And that truth will always destabilize those who benefited from your silence. They blame you, criticize you, or withdraw their support, not because you have harmed them, but because you have changed the role you once played in their psychological script. Humans build relationships with masks far more often than with real identities. A persona creates a sense of predictability. I know who you are. I know how you behave. I know what to expect from you. When you break that pattern, people feel disoriented. They mistake your transformation for betrayal. They feel threatened because losing your persona means losing the part of themselves they unconsciously placed on you. They may accuse you of being selfish or ungrateful or distant. What they are really expressing is fear. Fear that the relationship no longer exists on their terms. And so the world appears to turn against you. Not because your authentic self is unworthy, but because your persona was the bridge that connected you to them. Once you burn that bridge, the only ones who remain are the ones willing to walk through the fire with you. Everyone else retreats. Everyone else clings to their illusions. Everyone else demands the return of who you no longer are. Rejecting the persona forces people to confront their own shadows. Your authenticity activates something in them they have avoided. The realization that they too are hiding behind masks. Your courage exposes their fear. Your growth highlights their stagnation. Your refusal to pretend makes their pretending feel unbearable. Rather than face their own inner conflict, many will project it onto you. They will say you changed for the worse because it is easier than admitting they have not changed at all. But the collapse of the persona is also the moment when your true life begins. You no longer waste energy maintaining an identity that doesn't fit. You no longer betray your own psyche to satisfy the demands of the collective. You stop seeking validation and start seeking truth. The rejection you face from the world is the psychological price of freedom. It is the backlash that occurs when someone chooses authenticity over acceptance. And as painful as it feels, it is also a necessary threshold. The persona must fall apart for the real self to emerge. The mask must be discarded so the soul can breathe. The world may withdraw its approval, but you gain something far greater. You gain yourself. Opposition from others is almost never about what it appears to be on the surface. When people criticize you, resist you, or suddenly turn cold, their reaction often reveals far more about the hidden parts of their own psyche than about your behavior. This is what happens when the shadow, the unconscious side of a person, becomes activated. The shadow contains qualities they deny, repress, or refuse to acknowledge, traits they believe are unacceptable, threatening, or incompatible with their self-image. So when they encounter someone who mirrors those traits, even unintentionally, opposition emerges as a psychological defense. In that moment, they are not reacting to you, they are reacting to the part of themselves they cannot face. Opposition becomes a projection field. A person who cannot admit their envy, for example, will target someone who is confident or successful, accusing them of arrogance or selfishness. A person who hides their own aggression will call others intimidating, too much, or dangerous. Someone who has repressed their own fear of inadequacy will lash out at the achievements of others, not because those achievements are wrong, but because they remind them of what they believe they lack. This is the mechanism of psychological projection. The mind sees in others what it cannot accept within itself. When you rise, grow, evolve, or simply express yourself authentically, you trigger dormant fears and insecurities in others. Your presence acts like a mirror, reflecting back to them the qualities they left unresolved. They oppose you not because your actions are harmful, but because your actions illuminate something inside them they desperately want to keep in the dark. People often become hostile toward those who embody qualities they themselves have disowned. Confidence triggers the insecure. Independence triggers the controlling. Honesty triggers the deceptive. Strength triggers the weak. Authenticity triggers the artificial. This is why, at times, the more aligned you become with your truth, the more resistance you invite from the world. The shadow dynamics in others erupt in the form of gossip, blame, criticism, jealousy, passive aggression, or sudden distance. They cannot support what they feel threatened by, and they cannot celebrate what they feel inferior to. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your discipline exposes their laziness. Your inner peace exposes their inner chaos. You are not provoking them, you are simply revealing them. Opposition also appears when you refuse to carry their projections anymore. Some people only feel comfortable when you play a role that fits the narrative they've created. They might need you to be the weak one so they can feel strong, or the wrong one so they can feel right, or the irresponsible one so they can feel righteous. The moment you step out of that role, the shadow they assign to you has nowhere to go, so they turn against you. Their discomfort is not about your growth, but about the collapse of their illusion. Understanding the shadow dynamics behind opposition changes everything. Instead of taking hostility personally, you begin to recognize it as an unconscious reaction. Instead of doubting yourself, you see the psychological layers beneath the behavior. Instead of shrinking to appease others, you stand firm, knowing their resistance is not proof of your inadequacy, but evidence of their internal conflict. Every time someone opposes you without logical reason, something within them is being exposed. And every time you remain grounded despite their projections, something within you is being strengthened. The shadow thrives in silence, denial, and avoidance, but it loses its power the moment it is seen. When opposition rises, it signals that something hidden has been touched. Not your shadow, but theirs. And in witnessing this with awareness, you learn how human psychology truly operates, how projections are formed, and how your growth inevitably disrupts the unresolved corners of another person's mind. Isolation is often misunderstood as emptiness, loneliness, or punishment. But in reality, it is one of the most powerful catalysts for psychological awakening. When the noise of the world fades and the expectations of others fall away, something profound begins to stir within you. The mind, once preoccupied with roles, responsibilities, and constant interaction, finally turns inward. And in that inward turning, the deepest layers of the psyche emerge, layers that remain inaccessible when life is crowded with people, distractions, and social performance. Isolation does not create wisdom. It reveals the wisdom that was buried beneath the noise. When you are alone, you can no longer rely on external validation to define your worth. The absence of applause or approval compels you to confront how much of your identity was built for others. You start to question, who am I without their praise? Who am I without their praise? Expectations. Who am I without the persona I crafted to survive social life? These questions, though unsettling, mark the beginning of true self-awareness. Isolation strips away every borrowed identity and leaves you face to face with your undiscovered self. In solitude, your unconscious mind begins to speak more clearly. The insights you avoided, the emotions you suppressed, and the truths you ignored start to surface. You may feel memories rising unexpectedly, old wounds resurfacing, or sudden clarity emerging about decisions you've avoided. This is not regression, it is integration. The psyche uses silence to reveal what noise once concealed. Through this process, isolation becomes a mirror that shows you not who the world believes you are, but who you actually are beneath the layers of adaptation. Isolation also sharpens intuition. When you are no longer bombarded by opinions and influences, your inner voice becomes louder and more trustworthy. You start sensing what aligns with you and what doesn't. You start recognizing patterns in your relationships, behaviors, and experiences that you previously overlooked. Decisions that once felt confusing suddenly become obvious because they are no longer drowned out by the desires or fears of others. The clarity born in solitude is different from the clarity born in logic. It comes from a deeper, instinctive knowing that arises only when the psyche has room to breathe. The deepest parts of the psyche awaken in isolation because solitude removes the distractions that keep you from confronting yourself. Most people fear aloneness because they fear their own minds. They fear the unresolved pain, the unanswered questions, the unexpressed desires. They fear what they might discover if they stop drowning themselves in noise, entertainment, or social obligations. But those who are brave enough to sit with themselves discover something extraordinary. Beneath the discomfort lies tremendous inner power. In isolation, you rediscover your own strength. You learn that your value is not dependent on who calls, who approves, or who stays. You learn that peace is not found in the presence of others, but in the presence of self-understanding. You learn that every external loss pushes you toward internal gain. The people who walked away, the situations that collapsed, and the cycles that ended these were not signs of abandonment, but invitations to return to yourself. As solitude deepens, your creativity grows. Your imagination expands. Your mind begins to form connections that were impossible when you were constantly engaged with the outside world. Many breakthroughs, ideas, and transformations happen when a person disconnects from the collective and reconnects with the inner world. This inner world, once neglected, becomes a source of sustenance, direction, and identity. Isolation is not emptiness, it is space. It is the room the soul needs to unfold. It is the silence in which truth is heard. It is the stillness where unconscious material rises into awareness. When you withdraw from the world, you enter the hidden chambers of your psyche, discovering depths, strengths, and insights that could never awaken in the noise of the crowd. Rejection often arrives with a sharp sting, a sense of loss, and the feeling that something fundamental has been taken away. Yet beneath its surface lies one of the most transformative forces in the human journey. Rejection is not merely a closed door, it is an invitation to individuation, the process of becoming your most authentic, differentiated, and self-possessed self. It is a psychological summons that appears whenever life demands that you stop living through the expectations of others and start living through the truth of your own inner nature. When someone rejects you, whether through abandonment, criticism, betrayal, or dismissal, what is really being taken from you is the illusion that your identity depends on their acceptance. The moment that illusion collapses, you stand before yourself without the buffer of external validation. This can feel terrifying because you are forced to confront who you really are outside the roles you performed for others. But this is also where the path of individuation begins, where your identity shifts from being shaped by others to being shaped by the inner compass of your psyche. Rejection dismantles the persona you constructed to be liked, approved of, or tolerated. The mask you wore to fit in becomes unnecessary the moment fitting in is no longer an option. You can no longer hide behind who you pretended to be, so you are pushed into the uncomfortable but necessary territory of discovering who you truly are. Without the pressure to maintain connection, you gain access to your original impulses, your real desires, your unfiltered emotions, and your buried potential. Rejection clears the stage so the authentic self can finally step forward. It is in the aftermath of rejection that your inner voice becomes louder. When external voices fall silent, your psyche begins to reveal its deeper truths. Maybe the relationship you were clinging to was limiting your evolution. Maybe the group that rejected you was aligned with a version of you that needed to die. Maybe the rejection you experienced was not a punishment, but a correction, a redirection towards something more aligned with your psychological growth. Every rejection carries within it a message about where you were not meant to remain. Rejection also exposes the parts of you that were dependent on others for identity. You begin to see where you compromised yourself, where you diminished your needs, where you tolerated mistreatment, where you silenced your instincts just to belong. Individuation requires the dismantling of these patterns. You cannot fully become yourself while trying to be who others want you to be. Rejection forces you to confront the cost of self-abandonment and to reclaim the aspects of your personality you surrendered for acceptance. As you move through this internal reconstruction, your resilience grows. You begin to understand that your worth is inherent, not conditional. You start to feel the strength that comes from relying on your own judgment, your own values, and your own direction. Instead of seeking connection to avoid loneliness, you begin to choose relationships that truly reflect your evolving identity. Instead of chasing validation, you cultivate inner authority. Instead of shrinking to fit into someone's world, you start building your own. Eventually, you realize that rejection was not a wall blocking your path, but a doorway guiding you toward a truer one. It was the psyche's way of removing you from places where you could not go. It was life's way of signaling that you were living too small, too safely, too dependent on others for your sense of self. In its rawest form, rejection is an initiation, one that requires courage, self-honesty, and emotional endurance, but ultimately leads you toward a more integrated, self-aware, and sovereign existence. Through rejection, you discover that individuation is not something you pursue. It is something you are pushed into the moment the world stops allowing you to be who you are not. You become powerful the moment you stop living as a reflection of the collective and begin living as an expression of your inner truth. For most of your life, you were taught subtly or directly that your worth depends on how much you align with the expectations of others. You learn to behave in ways that would earn approval, avoid conflict, maintain harmony, and keep you safely within the boundaries of social acceptance. This conditioning forms a psychological cage, one that feels comfortable because it protects you from judgment, but ultimately suffocates your individuality. The collective doesn't ask who you are, it asks how well you can play the role it assigned to you. When you stop trying to please the collective, the first thing you encounter is fear. This fear is ancient, rooted in a survival instinct that equated belonging with safety. In the past, isolation meant danger, so conformity became a subconscious shield. But in the modern psychological landscape, belonging has transformed into a pursuit of validation rather than survival. The moment you break free from this outdated instinct, You reclaim a part of yourself that was lost to approval seeking. The fear begins to dissolve, revealing a deeper truth. You were never meant to be defined by others. You were meant to define yourself. As you release the need to please, something remarkable happens. You begin to think for yourself. Your thoughts are no longer filtered through the question, will they like this? Or will they judge me? Instead, your mind shifts toward what is true, necessary, and meaningful to you. This is the birth of inner authority. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. You stop being shaped by external forces and start shaping your inner world. For the first time, your life begins to feel like it belongs to you rather than to the collective expectations imposed upon you. When you stop seeking the approval of the group, you start hearing your own voice more clearly. Your instincts sharpen. Your intuition strengthens. Your desires, once buried beneath layers of conformity, rise to the surface. You begin to realize how much of your energy was spent maintaining an image instead of nurturing your real self. This shift alone is transformative. The individual who lives in alignment with their truth becomes unpredictable to the collective because authenticity cannot be controlled or manipulated. It follows its own path, guided by internal wisdom rather than external pressure. And as you embrace your individuality, something deeper awakens a sense of inner power that does not rely on applause, agreement, or acceptance. You become grounded in yourself. You begin to trust your decisions without needing reassurance. You set boundaries without guilt. You express yourself without censorship. This power is not aggressive or dominating. It is stable, clear, and unshakable. It comes from knowing who you are and refusing to betray that truth for the comfort of others. Stopping the cycle of pleasing the collective also reveals the people who were only attached to you because you complied with their expectations. When you stand firmly in your authenticity, you disrupt their ability to control, define, or limit you. Some will distance themselves because your freedom exposes their conformity. Others will criticize you because your strength challenges their dependency on validation. But those who remain, those who respect your individuality, become the foundation of your true community. They are drawn to you not because of a persona, but because of your real presence. As you continue to detach from the collective's approval, your path becomes clearer. You stop drifting with the current of public opinion and begin walking your own direction. This independence cultivates self-respect, resilience, and vision. You become capable of making decisions that align with your purpose rather than your fear of rejection. You begin to lead your life with clarity rather than being led by the desires of the crowd. Ultimately, the power that emerges when you stop pleasing the collective is the power of authenticity, an inner force that cannot be borrowed, copied, or taken. It is the strength of someone who belongs to themselves, someone who moves through life, guided not by the shifting demands of the crowd, but by the steady voice of their own evolving self.